Welcome to our 2024 championship game recap show on Next Man Up. The Kansas City Chiefs defeated the Baltimore Ravens 17-10, and the San Francisco 49ers defeated the Detroit Lions 34-31. We'll break down these games in detail and tease our upcoming Super Bowl 57 preview show. And plus, is Johnny already our playoff pick'em champion? How can we make things more interesting for this Super Bowl? It's Next Man Up, and it all starts now.
I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known. Don't know where it goes, but it's home to me and I walk alone. I walk this empty street.
Johnny P, congratulations on finishing. Well, I mean, we could say you finished and you won, but technically, you're 8-4. You're 2 games ahead, obviously, with just 1 game to go. Everyone else is sitting at 6-6. Nikki had an 0-2 weekend. Me and Chris had a 1-1 weekend. And Mr. Johnny, you were undefeated on the weekend, getting both the 49ers and the Chiefs. So let's give you a little FaceTime. Congrats on your little moral victory there, but I have an interesting proposal for the Super Bowl. How do you feel about the victory?
It feels good to be a winner. I've said before, I'll say it again. It feels great to win. I just chose who I thought were the 2 better teams to advance to Super Bowl 54, and here we find ourselves.
We could, we're all going to give our picks next week when we're previewing the Super Bowl itself. But I'm thinking if we give our picks next week, we can give our score predictions and then give our MVP. This way we all have a chance to really get like 3 points. And then Johnny, you're the winner, but I think that this is a way to make us all kind of have a little bit more of a fighting chance here.
Yeah, I'm open to whatever, honestly. And bragging rights are just good for me, honestly. I'm open to whatever. I mean, we've pitched this idea, at least I have. I mean, like, what if we all bet on the color of Gatorade the winning coach gets doused on? I'm going on a limb this year. I'm thinking it's yellow. Could be orange, could be red. There's a lot of red between both teams during the final game, but we'll see.
Will they break it up with a nice ice blue or something? Bring something like that into the fold.
I can see blue. I can definitely.
It's a very red game. I would not be surprised if it was red. Everything is red. Taylor Swift has a
So is that what
album
we'll do?
named Red,
We'll do?
song named Red.
Okay, so obviously it's time to talk football. The Chiefs and the Ravens game. I mean, are we tired of seeing the Chiefs? Yes. Is it at a point where everybody besides people of Kansas City are disgusted with the fact that Patrick Mahomes is in the Super Bowl and Travis Kelce is in the Super Bowl and there's all this sideshow? I think I speak for a majority of the country when I say yes. But simultaneously, we have to give them props. We have to give them respect.
It's funny. It's kind of the irony of a couple years ago was the graphic. It was everyone who wants the Chiefs to win was the whole country versus Tom Brady. And now it's everyone who wants the Chiefs to win is just Kansas City. And then the rest of the country is, against them. But, it's
Death, taxes, and Patrick Mahomes. That's what life is. That's what life's become for all of us football fans. And, it's funny. There was a time in all of our lives where, we hated seeing Nikki's Patriots in this game every year. And now we got a new team doing the same thing. And honestly, at this point, all you can really do is just tip your cap, because I think the majority of us all thought going in to this final game that this was the weakest the Chiefs have looked under the Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid era, the weakest defense, the weakest offense in terms of outside weapons. And 15 just still finds a way. And he proves time in and time again he's the best player on the planet, for a reason.
Yeah, and but I mean, yes, you said weakest weapons wise, but that was one of their weakest offensive performances, at least in the second half. They didn't even eclipse 100 yards in the second half, and they put up 0 points in the second half. The defense showed up in the second half, and Spagnuolo, let me tell you something. Spagnuolo looks like he's one of the best defensive coordinators in the league right now. And Tony, considering the discourse with the defensive coordinator side of the ball at the Giants, how much are you missing Spags right now after seeing what he did to the Ravens last week?
I always loved Spags. I mean, I never wanted to see him go, but he deserved his head coaching opportunities when Tom Coughlin was still with the Giants, so I don't think there was anybody who wanted to get between that. Obviously, yeah, Spags has some creative blitz packages, but I don't want to give him too much credit because I just don't understand what the Ravens were doing. I don't understand what the Ravens were doing this week. I don't understand what the Bills were doing the previous week. And I don't understand what the Dolphins were doing the week before that. And that's not me trying to discredit the Chiefs in any way. I think it just comes down to the fact that when you see the Chiefs, everybody plays scared. And everybody's just like, oh, God, I hope we don't make mistakes. And then what do? You make mistakes. Every team is shooting themselves in the foot. Like Zay Flowers in particular, the taunting penalty, just stupid rookie mistake. I don't think that needed to make or break the game. But at that point, how could you be that thick to even think that that was a good idea? And then down on the one, I get that he's trying to make a play and get in the end zone, but that's very dumb to reach and extend the ball and give people an opportunity to punch it loose, especially when it's only second down. If it's fourth down, okay, you're trying to make something happen. It's a risk you're willing to take. But it was 2 back-to-back horrible rookie mistakes, and it could have been 17-14 and with lots of time to go in the fourth quarter, and we were kind of robbed of a better game, I feel like.
I don't really have an issue with Zay Flowers extending the ball over the end zone. I think that was just a little bit more bad luck. Taunting, standing over a guy. I mean, of course, we talked about all year consistency with the penalties, consistency of referee calls. There really isn't any consistency with the taunting, but that was a blatant taunting. You're going to get a penalty doing what he did in that moment. The extending of the ball, I think that's just a little bit of bad luck, and tip of the cap to, that Kansas City defender for stripping that ball and punching that ball out. So, but the Ravens, again, the Ravens were all the way down. Oh no, and that was a dumb bozo moment. Don't get me wrong, but the Ravens just beat themselves. And for one of the best rushing attacks in the league, run the goddamn ball. Why are we going to make Lamar do more than he needs to? Run the ball. You have Gus Edwards, you have Justice Hill, you got all these dudes that run the rock, run the ball.
They abandoned what made their offense what it was. They're a team that runs the ball, and they passed it way more than they even attempted to rush it. And when they were running it relatively effectively too. It's not even like they were getting stuffed constantly. I mean, I'd like to think that they were actually running it pretty well. And, when Lamar got out of the pocket, he was able to run it. He got some pretty good chunks. They have their stable of running backs that I pointed out after the divisional round that would run it well. And they just kept airing it out. I mean, granted, they made some good plays through the air. I mean, Zay Flowers' touchdown catch was, Lamar got out of it and then put a beautiful pass down there. So, I mean, yes, Zay Flowers had some rookie mistakes that did cost them in the end, but he was their top performer on offense at the same time. So it's kind of it's a double-edged sword. It's he was their top playmaker, but he also was the guy who ultimately did cost them in the end. And Lamar made a boneheaded throw on the last play of the game for them too. Why are you throwing it into triple coverage in that situation? There was no reason why you should be throwing it to Isaiah Likely when he's in triple coverage like that. Once again, it was not fourth down. You did not have to make that throw in that situation.
Nikki, did you think that was pass interference on that play that he threw it up there? I'm sorry, Nikki, what did you think? Because I thought that was pass interference there.
I mean, it depends on that. I mean, in the playoffs, it's pass interference. I feel like in that crucial moment, towards the end of the game, where it's kind of a last ditch effort, you never know what's going to happen. It's 50-50 either way on that. So that's what I'd say with that in that scenario, but. Another thing too that was I think was an advantage for the Chiefs is that they were able to take the crowd out of it at M&T Bank Stadium. As we saw the week before in the divisional round against the Texans, that crowd was raucous and loud and did not stop the entire game. And it caused so many distractions for the Texans offense. They got penalized so much before the snap. And this one, it was different. They didn't bring that same energy. And I think being taken out of the game by the Chiefs Baltimore's team also recognized that, and it kind of like took the wind out of their sails too, with the crowd being the way that it was.
And I think Kansas City is also a more disciplined team as a whole. I mean, Houston was one of the more penalized teams throughout the season as it was. I mean, Jets are most penalized. I think that Houston was second most penalized throughout the season. So, that could be part of it. They're a little more jumpy. They were a younger team. Kansas City is a much more mature and well-coached team with Andy Reid at the helm, who rumors have it he may retire after the Super Bowl. And we talked about Bill Belichick being unemployed. Does Bill Belichick take over the Chiefs if Andy Reid retires, and then the Chiefs just continue to ruin everyone's lives and ruin more people's lives? The fact that it could be Bill Belichick, it very well could happen.
Tell me what's
I like
wrong
the
with
idea.
this picture. Gus Edwards had 3 carries. Gus Edwards had 3 carries. Isaiah Pacheco had 24 carries. Tell me what's wrong with that picture.
And this is why I have a hard time giving so much credit to Steve Spagnuolo. Like, how do we give all the credit in the world to Steve Spagnuolo when you just threw out that stat, Johnny? There were 16 runs in this game from the Ravens, 11 handoffs. Does anybody know? I do. Does anybody know how many handoffs were in the second half? Not 1, not 2, but 3.
6,
3.
2.
3. I mean, there were some scrambles. Like, Lamar was able to generate some running on his own. But in terms of pure handoffs, like you've decided to run the ball on this play, there were 3 in the entire second half. First 2 plays of the half. The third one did not occur until 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And this lead never was higher than 17-3. So that's very uncharacteristic of John Harbaugh. And I thought he played a little scared.
I mean, he definitely did. I was just confused with who the Ravens were to lead them up to this point, and that's not the Ravens team that we saw, and that's not the Ravens team that we got in that game. And then we got to listen to Tony Romo drool over Patrick Mahomes the whole time. Can we talk about Tony Romo for a second? What happened to the Tony Romo that first started with Jim Nantz, and who's the Tony Romo we have now? And we have to listen to Tony Romo for the Super Bowl. I'm not saying he's bad at what he does, but I feel like the chemistry between him and Nance is off. And it's kind of been bothering me that people aren't recognizing this. And I'm hoping you guys are recognizing that Tony Romo has had a lot of weird, bizarre moments on the air lately. And this for the Super Bowl.
Well, first off, you're not forced to listen to Tony Romo for the Super Bowl. There is an alternate broadcast on Nickelodeon if you would like to watch on Nickelodeon.
I looked that up, Chris.
You might have to watch that one if you get annoyed with Tony Romo.
Okay.
But there are rumors that Jim Nantz may be retiring from football after the Super Bowl. This might be his last football game that he calls. So it might be like they both know that he's on his way out. So they're just kind of like, well, I don't know I don't know who's coming in after you. So it might be like this weird sort of, I know you're on your way out, so I'm going to try and put a lot of more different things out there for whoever's coming in. Like it might be like a weird relationship right now because he knows that he's on his way out.
Their chemistry is off. Romo will talk over him. It's just bizarre. I wish the fans and I wish maybe the analysts and broadcasters themselves could vote for who should call the Super Bowl between whatever network. Like if it was Fox this year, you bet your ass Greg Olsen and Kevin Burkhardt would be in that studio. Greg Olsen's been phenomenal.
I think that's been the best commentary team out of the 3 big ones this whole season. I've never been a Chris Collinsworth fan either, so anything to keep him away from the Super Bowl, fine. I'm fine with that. But it stinks for Nance and Romo because they were so good the first few years, and now, especially these past 2 years, it's all of a sudden, like you said, it's all of a sudden turned on a dime for Tony. I don't know what's up with him.
I feel like it's been lazy. I don't know what it is. It's not analyst work that he's doing. He's just kind of chirping when he feels like it.
It's almost like he's too comfortable and just spitting things out.
A little bit.
He was trying to make his name for himself when he first started. Now he feels a little too comfortable and he's just kind of spitting everything out when he feels like it. And it's definitely taken a downturn on his quality. And just like the game is played between the best 2 teams, it should be doing. Let the best 2 announcers of the year, let the fans decide the best 2 announcers be. And I'm with you. Let Greg Olsen be on this game. He's, I think, the best color analyst out there. And unfortunately, he's losing that top spot next year to Tom Brady with Fox, which is just a real shame. It's a real shame. It's a real shame that Greg Olsen's losing that spot to Brady.
If Nance does retire, maybe Greg Olsen jumps ship over to CBS and pairs up with Romo there. and he could still stay.
But he's a color analyst. He's not going to be doing the play-by-play, though. That's the thing.
Well, why do we have to have it this way? Why does it have to be a play-by-play guy and a color guy who's a former player? I would love to hear Mike Tirico and Jim Nantz together. Wouldn't that be fine? Like, personally, I like guys who've studied broadcasting and have literally tried their entire lives to get there.
Coming from, I'll explain it from the broadcast side of things because I worked in it for 10 years. So it's I tried that. I tried doing it. We're just broadcast people doing it. The people that are watching it want more explanation of what's going on. They want the breakdowns of things. Broadcasters can only break things down so much because they've seen things. People that have lived it and have played it, they can explain things to a different level. And
I understand that. Yeah, you don't need to explain that. Like, I understand that.
And that's why all these guys get these jobs. And that's why it's not just like, Jim Nantz and Mike Tirico doing it, because they're not going to have the explanations and
I get that. I'm just saying personally,
explaining, oh well, this guy should be going this way, and that's why color analysts aren't just a broadcast person, because I've seen it done and it really does fall on its face.
Well, personally, I would rather hear two guys with 20 years of broadcasting experience than Tony Romo making sounds that aren't even English, because he's clearly just talking as things come out. Yes, he's very good at predicting plays, and I don't necessarily hate Romo, but I agree. Like, I'd rather hear someone more professional in the business. Now, wrapping up the Ravens game and Chiefs game, Travis Kelce was perfect. 11 for 11 with 116 yards and a touchdown. I don't understand. Like, obviously, Travis Kelce is going to be a force, and you're probably not going to completely eliminate him. But how do you let him have his way against you? And how do you let him be open by 5 or 6 yards repeatedly? It was a pitiful performance by the Ravens. I'll give all the credit in the world to the Chiefs. But to me, this was an absolute choke on the Ravens' part.
And I will add another question: is how are we having this same conversation again? We had this same exact conversation after the Bills game. How is Travis Kelce the guy that that they're going to look to, the guy who's getting the ball? Like, that they're going to look to him. Why is Kyle Hamilton not drilling him in the chest every time that he has a chance to? Why is he open? Why is he constantly open? Why is he constantly getting the looks? Why is he getting these opportunities? I mean, I would like to think that the Niners are going to know that he's the guy they're going to go to. We need to take him out of the equation. I mean, the Ravens did a good job, for the most part, taking care of the receivers. I think Rashee Rice did not have as big of a game as a lot of people may have expected him to. But MVS did have a big catch later on in the game. But when it comes to Kelce, that he's going to be the number one. We said this last week. That Travis Kelce is their number one receiver, even though he plays tight end. How does he get 11 catches? And I think he had 7 in the first quarter alone.
It's baffling.
Out of the teams that were left in the playoffs, though, I think it's a good way to transition over to the other game from this past weekend, where the 49ers are probably the one that have the best chance of playing Travis Kelce in that way, of containing him as much as they can. As much as I was pulling for the Lions to win, in the end, I think what happened with the Lions is that they got comfortable. They got too comfortable with their lead going into the second half, and you saw San Francisco take advantage of that. Brock Purdy or Kyle Shanahan must have done something in the locker room to wake everybody up. And, 24 unanswered points in the second half, even 24-27 actually, with going up to 34-31 for the final. That was a huge half for the Niners in a completely different football game.
No doubt.
Yeah.
What a disappointing thing for the Lions. Listen, I didn't want to do this, but I have to absolutely kill Dan Campbell. And I know it's his thing to go for it on fourth down. I know it's his thing to be super aggressive and have a neck vein and not care about the circumstances. I know he's basically that kid in Madden that just goes for it on fourth down, no matter the circumstances. But can anyone tell me, here's a fun little fact. What is the largest comeback in NFC Championship history? Does anyone know? It's 17 points. You had a 17-point lead at halftime. You had an opportunity to go up 17 points again, and you decided to go for it, and you didn't get it. Obviously, Reynolds dropped the pass. At that point, you didn't get it. You're still in control. You're up 14. Let's think, okay, let's dial it back. Later in the game, no, he doubles down. He doubles down on what he's trying to do. And what happens on when you're in field goal range and you have an opportunity to tie the game with 8 minutes left and you don't, you lose, especially in the championship game.
Yeah, I mean,
Dan Campbell's not going to change who he is because it's ultimately what got them to the NFC Championship game was his aggression. But ultimately, his aggression caught up with them and it cost them the game. As you said, you had a chance to kick the field goal, tie the game, and you're probably headed. That game's at least headed to overtime. But they don't. Josh Reynolds drops the ball. And then they get a touchdown on the preceding drive after that. So you have that big CMC run that gets them down to the 1, and then CMC goes in the end zone after that. So they have this propensity to go for it on 4th down. They were in field goal range. Is it another instance where it was like Anders Carlson with the Packers where they just don't trust the kicker? I mean, did they just not trust their kicker in that situation, or is it Dan Campbell just saying, I'm putting my nuts on the table again?
I'm sorry, Nikki. Everyone keeps mentioning Dan Campbell this, Dan Campbell that, and I understand him being aggressive on 4th down, but why aren't we talking about the Lions defense letting up all those points in the second half when they only allowed San Francisco to score 7 points in the first half? I mean, are we just going to ignore that fact that this Lions defense was completely vulnerable in the second half, that they let so many points up, that they let San Francisco come right back into this game? Forget about the fourth down, calls that Dan Campbell had. Let's talk about that Lions defense. I mean, as a Chicago Bears fan, I've watched the Bears move the ball freely on Detroit's defense. That defense is vulnerable. Of the 4 teams that were left in conference championship play on Sunday, the Lions had the weakest defense. I mean, and you clearly saw it in the second half.
Yeah, and that's definitely something to say for the team. I think that's going to be something where Campbell's got to go into the offseason and look at those holes on the defense to acquire some guys to patch them up and get them in much better shape for next season. But I'll say too, for him, just with the 4th downs real quick, if he had that same 4th down situation where he kicks the field goal instead, fine, take those points. But if it comes down to it where you have the ball with a minute left to go and you have no choice but to go on 4th down, then I'd understand that. But yeah, I mean, going back, the defense, it was just funny. They looked, like you said, Johnny, they looked completely different than they did in the first half. And I think, again, it goes back to what I said, where they just got complacent with where they were. They were fine with their lead. And they were, I think in their mind after that first half, they were already punching their tickets to Vegas. And I think that definitely cost them in the end.
No doubt. I mean, guys, the Lions defense, they gave up 27 unanswered points. That's embarrassing. But the Lions had opportunities to win the game. And with basic fundamental coaching, if you just take the 6 points that were there for you, assuming you make your chip shot field goals, you are in the Super Bowl. So there is nobody in the world that deserves more blame than Dan Campbell. And not only that, even after the 4th down debacles, later in the game, they're down 10 and they're trying to salvage it, and it's 2 minutes left. There was so much stupidity that I can't even wrap my head around it. You wanted to preserve as much time as possible. You want to keep all 3 timeouts because you got to score twice and you got to get the ball back. So they could have easily just taken a field goal before 2 minutes. They were in field goal range. Why not take 3 there and keep your timeouts? Then you can decide, let's pooch it, let's onside, let's kick deep. We can do whatever we want. But instead, they said, we want the touchdown now. Okay, then you better get it. And guess what? When you're inside the 5 and you run the ball, that was a Tyrod Taylor moment. You got tackled and you had to burn a timeout. You cannot be running the ball there. I absolutely do not understand how you could be this good a coach and be that stupid. It's all on Dan Campbell in my eyes.
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with them going for it on that 4th down. When you're that close to the end zone and you want to get the 7 there, go for it. Don't run the ball, because then you're forced to get the onside kick. You're under 2 minutes. You're forced to get the onside kick after that, because if you get the touchdown there, which they did on the 4th down play with the pass, go with the pass on 3rd down. If you want to run it on 4th down, you can run it on 4th down, because if you don't get it, guess what? You're giving the ball back anyway, whether you get it miss it on a pass or miss it on a run, and the clock stops. You don't have to use your timeout. And then if you get the ball, then you punt the ball the other side, and they get the ball the other way, whether you kick it, onside it, whatever, and you get the stop, you get the ball back, you still have a chance. So I don't understand the logic of the run on third versus run on fourth. If you wanted to do a run and a pass, do the pass on the third, do the run on the fourth to conserve that timeout, because that's ultimately what costed them. Because if you look at the week before that against them, if the Bucs ran the ball there, took the timeout there, Todd Bowles probably would have just packed up and just walked off the field after that botch play. Oh, well, we lost.
I can't help but feel heartbroken for all the Detroit fans that really thought that they'd finally get a chance to watch their team make it to the Super Bowl. And there are so many teams that make it to the NFC, AFC conference championships and never go back there for another decade or so. This was their window. The Niners have been there a decent amount the last 5 years. I think 4 out of the last 5 years they've made the NFC Championship game. This was the Lions' chance to punch their ticket and do something super special. And I feel like a lot of America was getting, wrapped up in that feel-good story of watching Detroit do something that they've never done before. And you still got to tip your cap to Detroit. I mean, what a hell of a season. Dan Campbell for, everything that we're, knocking him for not doing, for not playing it safe. I mean, he led the best Detroit Lions season in franchise history. So you got to tip your cap to where credit's due. But ultimately, I mean, you want to talk about closing out and finishing games. That's something that they really, really struggled at on Sunday. And, here come the 49ers, a team that, a lot of people were expecting to be in this position and to, punch their ticket to Super Bowl 54, and now they find themselves facing the big bad wolf at number 15. I don't know about you guys.
Rematch of 2020, I think it was, right?
Yep. That's right. Four seasons ago. So I think this is a great matchup. I don't know about you guys. I feel like it's so hard to bet against the Chiefs. Chiefs right now on the sports book I was just looking at are 2-point underdogs. I don't know how you can bet against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid right now. I feel like it's going to be a really close game, but will it be as good of a Super Bowl as we saw last year between the Chiefs and the Eagles? I mean, I don't know about you guys. I'm really excited. More for Usher than anything, but other than that.
That'll ultimately be the next week's discussion of the full breakdown of the game, what we're looking forward to the most. And, sorry, Nikki, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'll let you go after this, but, Johnny, I know you mentioned it, you have that window, decades after that. I mean, speaking from experience, Jets back-to-back AFC Championship games. Now they have the longest stretch of not making the playoffs. So I know the feeling that you were just referencing.
Yeah. The Bears made the NFC. So check this out. I saw a stat real quick, Nikki, and I'll throw it to you. NFC North teams in conference championship play are 2-9 in the modern NFC North era. Afterwards, after it was the NFC Central when the Buccaneers were also in that division. 2-9. The only 2 wins of NFC North teams are the Bears back in 2005 when we beat the Saints to advance to the Super Bowl. Obviously lost to Peyton Manning and the Colts. And then Green Bay, when Green Bay beat my Bears in 2010 to advance to their Super Bowl, Aaron Rodgers' only Super Bowl victory. It's just crazy. Nothing is promised. Nothing is certain. And, it's going to sting a little bit if you're a Lions fan for sure.
Yeah, but I think with the heart that this team showed this year and Dan Campbell with just being invested in everybody in that locker room, whether it's players, coaches, staff, whatever. I think it's a lot of things that Lions fans can be proud of this year. Obviously, the story ended a different way that they wanted to, but I have no doubt in my mind that next season that Campbell will continue to make the Lions a contender for the NFC North and maybe for another few seasons to come.
I mean, yeah, Campbell. Listen, I feel bad killing him because I actually do like him, but his aggression absolutely costs him, and he has to own this. He has to be completely accountable for what happened. But to go from a 3-win team to a 9-win team to in the NFC Championship when you're not that far removed from an 0-16 season, absolutely a great accomplishment. But they have to finish the job. If I'm a Lions fan, I'm sick to my stomach. I as somebody who grew up with the Giants and Tom Coughlin, the idea of leaving points on the field is absolutely the worst thing you can do. So I don't get it. I'll never get it, especially when you could have tied the game with 8 minutes left. That to me is abysmal. I would put Dan Campbell at the top of my shite list for championship weekend. I would probably put Dan Campbell 1, Zay Flowers 2, and then then we could take it from there. But maybe Harbaugh after that.
Before we get to that, I do want to acknowledge that catch that Brandon Ayuk did make. That I think that was the real turning point in the game, that the deflection he caught. Awesome. And then after the game, he credited the ladybug that landed on his shoe for good luck before the game. So I just thought that was a nice little anecdote. So, I think that was the game changer. The deflection that went right into him, like, you can't script that play. That was just crazy that even happened. When it comes to my list, I mean, I think Dan Campbell, I honestly put Reynolds above Flowers. I mean, I think that his drops were more costly because he did less for his team than Flowers did for his. I think Flowers did more for his team to almost offset the boneheaded mistakes that he made, because, the Ravens aren't a air it out team. So the fact that he did as much as he did for them in that game and the game plan surrounded them, I think that he did more for their team than he's usually doing. So good on him for that. But those mistakes that he made were definitely more costly than you would have liked to see. But he is a rookie. So, I mean, you'd like to think that he's going to reflect on that, be better in the future. But, I mean, Campbell's aggression, number 1, I'd say Reynolds 2, Flowers 3, and then Harbaugh's coaching probably 4. Like, that's probably how my top 4 on that list that you're referencing there.
Yeah, and I got to go with Cassius too. I mean, going back to the Ravens game, we talk about Lamar Jackson basically passing it to himself for another impressive catch for this weekend too. But I mean, as far as that list, as far as the scapegoats for the weekend, I'd probably put Harbaugh at the top of my list because, again, it goes back to they didn't stick with the running plan for what they've had and how dominant their run game has been this season, and they kind of abandoned it, especially in the second half, as Tony pointed out earlier. So I'd say Harbaugh would probably be at the top of my list. Zay Flowers right behind him, and Reynolds sitting at number 3 for my top 3 on that.
I think it really comes down to coaching. Dan Campbell and John Harbaugh, just the Ravens' whole offensive staff. They just completely threw away what made the Ravens this year. I don't know what Ravens team that was. I really don't. And their defense kept them in it all game. They were able to, hold Kansas City to as low as a total point as they did. And I just don't understand what the Ravens were doing. And then, going back to Dan Campbell, just, you could be aggressive, but take the points when the points are there, especially in a really close contest like that. And watching this team come back, I mean, I really think it comes down to coaching. Zay Flowers, he's a rookie. He made a bozo dumb play. I'm not gonna get on him about the fumble on the goal line there. I think that's just a really great play by that Kansas City defender. So really, it comes down to me. It was coaching that's on my shite list this week.
No doubt. I think the 2 coaches, Campbell and Harbaugh, have to be towards the top of the shite list. But I'll go Flowers over Reynolds. Reynolds, obviously, the drops, like, what are you doing? Concentrate. He's been a big part of the team. But Flowers, like, you got to be able to control yourself, and you gave somebody extra motivation. And I feel like if you watched Hardman the previous week, you should know reaching at the goal line is dangerous. You should only do it if it's absolutely necessary and you can score. Again, we talked about it in previous shows. Fundamentals, these are things we were taught at a young age. Tuck the ball, please. Like, it's really not that hard. But listen, it comes down to Shanahan. Shanahan's an excellent coach.
Ball security is job security.
Ball security is job security. Shanahan's an excellent coach. I sincerely hope he can give the Chiefs a run for their money. The Chiefs are I feel like they're just doing what they do every single week. They're pounding it with Pacheco. They're dumping it off to Kelsey. And it just is not necessarily that complicated, but they're not making mistakes. They're waiting it out. They're not doing stupid things like they were during the regular season, lining up off sides or complaining or getting wrapped up in the officiating. They're just winning for their girl Taylor, and they're keeping it cool the entire time. So hopefully we can see something different in the Super Bowl. I think I don't really have emotion towards the 49ers, but obviously we're going to break all this down. We're going to have an awesome Super Bowl show upcoming, and I can't thank the listeners enough for tuning in. Obviously, I felt like I just couldn't help but feel disappointed after the championship game weekends. I wanted to actually enjoy it. I did enjoy it to an extent, but the results were very disappointing, especially when you see poor fundamentals at the highest possible stage. So, but listen, this was a championship breakdown of Next Man Up, and we have an extra week. Everybody can rest and stretch and do what they got to do. It's a little depressing because it's the end of the year with the Super Bowl, but we will have a Super Bowl preview show before the game. We'll go over the NFL honors. We'll talk about everything. We'll talk a lot more about Taylor Swift and anything going on with the sideshow there, because we didn't really talk about it a lot today. So thanks for tuning in, and as always, be well.